Need to book a flight without breaking the bank? Low Cost Air is your discount supermarket for all airline tickets. Whether you're flying American, Delta, United, specialized international carriers, or any other airline, they've got you covered at prices that will make your wallet happy. And here's the best part. They guarantee you'll speak to a real human being within 60 seconds. No frustrating automated systems or endless holds. To get this exclusive deal, you must call 866-613-3100. I'll repeat that for you, 866-613-3100. One more time so you can grab your phone, 866-613-3100. Now, give it a call, start saving on your next flight.
Tax season's here, and the Tax Doctor's team of experts can work directly with the IRS so you keep more of your hard-earned money. They know the tax laws inside and out, and they will fight aggressively to save your cash. If you owe the IRS a substantial amount and you want to protect your finances, call right now for a free consultation to learn how they can put money back in your pocket. To get this expert tax relief help, you have to call 877-208-9550. Let me repeat that. 877-208-9550. I'll give you that number one more time. You have to call this number, 877-208-9550. Don't let the IRS take what's yours. Make the call today.
Hello, and welcome to This Week Explained, your essential download on the global news stories that are making headlines. We, over here, are ready to unpack yet another complex week of news stories from around the globe. But just one thing before we kick it off. To make sure this lands in your feed automatically each week, take a moment right now and hit follow or subscribe. It's easy, and it ensures that you stay in the loop. Plus, if you want to help others find this content, leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify is incredibly valuable. We also want to give a huge thank you to the folks powering today's episode, Fresh Roasted Coffee. They make it possible for us to bring you this analysis each week. And if you're someone who truly appreciates quality coffee delivered at peak freshness, we highly recommend them. They offer a wonderful variety, but you have to click the link in our show notes to get the best deal. They've set up a special offer just for our listeners. How great is that? So enter the code this week, THISWEEK, to get 20% off your first order. It really is some of the best coffee you can buy. And finally, This Week Explained is proudly part of the amazing Leon Media Network. So if you have a moment, check out all the other podcasts on this network at leonmedianetwork.com. All right. Let's get straight into the stories shaping your world. This week, we're breaking down the latest on the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, U.S. force reduction in Syria, and a possible war between India and Pakistan. All right, let's dive right into the latest developments in the war in Ukraine. It feels like we've had geopolitical whiplash this week regarding Russia and Ukraine. Because, just days ago, we all witnessed footage of an horrific strike on Kyiv. And at least 12 were killed, 90 were injured. Reports called it the deadliest attack on the capital since last July. Then we saw President Trump speak out quite strongly against Putin, telling him directly on Truth Social to stop.
Yes, he did do that.
Yeah, I know. And I don't think it'll work, but,
We'll see.
Yeah, okay. Well, he called it, quote, not necessary and very bad timing, end quote. What's good timing whenever it comes to launching an attack?
It's the Bill Burr quote, right, from his recent special. How is this legal? How is war legal?
How is this? But his wording, this is bad timing.
Yeah.
Please tell us what good timing would be. But he told reporters that he was, quote, not happy, end quote, and putting pressure on both sides.
Right.
Which has been working so well thus far in this particular conflict.
Oh, yeah. The war was over after day one.
Right.
Right.
Like he promised.
Oh, no. We're 100 days in, and the war's still going.
Raging.
And I will say that post, which was just Vladimir, stop. I don't think I've ever seen him that, curt in a Truth Social post. I think it was very notable. It was a rare and direct public criticism towards Vladimir Putin. Now, he's criticized Zelensky ad nauseum, day in and day out. Trump did mention waiting a week to see if a deal emerged, but he did warn, quote, things will happen, end quote, if the bombing didn't end. And it sounded like a line was being drawn here. Now, obviously, it was a very vague line, but one nonetheless.
I wonder what things will happen. I wonder.
Yeah.
Okay. And all of this happened while his envoy, Steve Witkoff, was heading to Moscow. And almost immediately after Witkoff met Putin in Moscow, suddenly the tune changes dramatically. Trump arrived in Rome for the Pope's funeral, saying Russia and Ukraine are very close to a deal. So how do we square that from stop to it's almost done, guys?
Yeah, look, that's always been the billion-dollar question here. So, like I said, Witkoff met Putin for 3 hours. There were no Ukrainians in the room, mind you. And the Kremlin called the talks, quote, constructive, end quote. Now, Putin's aide, Yushakov, said it brought U.S. and Russian positions quite close.
That's scary.
Yeah, right. Look, we try not to bring opinions into this, but if you don't feel that Russia is an adversary to the United States, you just haven't been tracking Russia for as long as some other people have, because they're definitely an adversary, and they take an adversarial approach to the United States. Now, Russia and Ukraine Russia and the United States are starting to discuss resuming direct Russia-Ukraine talks. Now, Trump echoed this optimism. He said that most of the major points in this ceasefire are agreed to.
Is it a ceasefire that's been released to the public, or is this stupid secret?
No, this is still, we still don't know everything that's in these discussions because it's not on paper yet. These are just discussions.
Okay, but constructive between the U.S. and Russia doesn't mean constructive for Ukraine. So where does that leave President Zelensky? I mean, he had to cut his trip to South Africa short because of those Kyiv attacks.
Yeah, and Zelensky's position seems much more direct and clear, but also much less optimistic than President Trump's. He said late Friday that real pressure on Russia is needed, and he brought up the territorial issues. He said that those discussions can only happen after a full and unconditional ceasefire.
He also said Ukraine negotiating at all is already a huge compromise because, I mean, they were invaded.
Yes.
You can feel the frustration, especially after those Kyiv strikes. He said that it is Ukrainians who are running out of patience because they are the ones that are under attack. Mm-hmm. So what is this supposed deal that Trump says is so close? Reports are filtering out, and it sounds like Ukraine is being asked to concede a lot more than Russia.
Yeah, absolutely. And based on reports citing some documents that were seen by European officials, the U.S. proposal from Witkoff that he's been discussing with Russia is incredibly tough on Ukraine. We're talking about the U.S. potentially offering legal acceptance of Russia's annexation of Crimea. That's something Trump has openly said he'd support. And de facto recognition of Russian control over other territory that's occupied. And that's nearly 20% of Ukraine right now. Those include a place like Luhansk, Donetsk, those areas. And then crucially, it reportedly rules out Ukraine's NATO membership, which Ukraine's not going to get NATO membership. I think we need to drop that now and offer protections like Article 5 protection to a non-NATO member for Ukraine.
So, legal acceptance of the Crimean annexation. Wow. Okay. That goes against the established international norms about not changing borders by force. Yeah. And Zelensky has repeatedly said giving up Crimea is impossible.
Yeah, he's been firm on that from the start. Now, politically, it's likely untenable for Zelensky to concede that. He did make that interesting comment acknowledging Trump's assessment that Crimea will stay with Russia, but he immediately qualified it by saying, I want to quote him here, quote, "Today, we do not have enough weapons to return control," end quote.
So is that kind of like a dig at all the people who stopped sending aid?
Yeah,
Be like, this is your fault this is happening?
basically saying you left Ukraine to do this on our own,
Mhm.
and now we don't have the weapons necessary to prevent Russia from.
Annexing their land.
Well, and starts with Ukraine's land, but Zelensky's trying to tell Europe what are the second and third order effects of this.
Yeah.
It's gonna be that Putin's gonna go after Moldova
Yeah.
and after Poland, Finland.
Finland.
If we don't, if he's not stopped now, what's going to stop him from continuing this push western?
Right.
So Zelensky's statement there is a statement of the current military reality. This is not a political concession or an acceptance of annexation. We're looking at a universe of difference between the current military situation and then a political situation that's out there.
So the U.S. plan essentially gives Russia much of what it wants territorially, which was a concern for a lot of people, obviously, especially Ukraine.
Yeah.
While the European and Ukrainian stance is ceasefire first, and then we can begin to discuss the territory. They also seem like a universe apart.
Yeah, it's miles apart right now. I think you said it right. A universe apart. That's the proper statement there. And look, it's a fundamental divergence. The reported U.S. approach looks like concede land so you can have peace now. That's absolutely driven by Trump's desire to fulfill his campaign promise, where he said he was going to end the war first by the first day he was in office and then in the first 100 days. But now it's just as quickly as he possibly can.
Keep moving that goalpost, buddy.
Yeah, at some point you'll get a victory, or you can then take a victory. Look, the Ukrainian and likely European view here is to first let's stop the aggression. Then let's start to negotiate a just peace, because the war isn't won by either side, right? So it's stagnated, and that should come into these discussions. We do not need, as an international community, to be rewarding an aggressor.
And adding another layer, Trump also brought up a delayed, quote, rare earths mineral deal, end quote, with Ukraine, saying that Zelensky hadn't signed the papers and urging him to do it immediately. Like, what are they getting out of it if they're going to have to concede everything to Russia?
Right.
It doesn't, I mean, in the beginning, it kind of made sense because we were going to help them out in return.
Well, and some analysts would say who look at this favorably, they would say that the security guarantee of this rare earths deal is that if the U.S. is getting 50% of the profits from the rare earths deal,
You're not going to want Russia to come in?
they're not going to want Russia to continue their aggressive move to the West, because then that takes the money away from the United States.
Ukraine's safety shouldn't hinge on them giving away 50% of their
Exactly.
rare earth minerals.
Some would argue it shouldn't have hinged on giving up their nuclear weapons, but they were,
Yeah.
Ukraine, by all accounts,
has tried to do what they were told to do.
they've tried to, but
Bit of a
they've also been a very corrupt government. They've had corrupt governments. Some
Who hasn't?
Right.
Join the club.
So I think that was kind of the thought of taking nuclear weapons away from Ukraine. There was, at that point in history, there was a ton of arms movement going on in Eastern Europe.
Sending them all across borders and
Yeah,
stuff.
going into Turkey, going various other
Like
other
sales or just trying to hide them?
No, both.
Okay.
So sales trying to hide nuclear weapons, and look, we had a very high level conversation when the drone. You remember the drones over New Jersey, and a lot of people were talking about, oh, what are the drones doing there? Are they
Right.
Chinese drones? Blah blah blah. Some were talking about how they were U.S. government drones looking for nuclear weapons that were lost during the movement of those weapons from Ukraine to somewhere else. So
So we have some Ukrainian nuclear weapons?
that's the thought from some people, but that has neither been confirmed nor denied,
Okay.
and it won't be.
Yeah, we're not going to find that out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, back to the rare earths.
Mhm.
The rare earths deal that Trump wants Zelensky to sign. Zelensky hadn't signed the papers, and he was urged to do it.
Mhm.
Is is it like leverage? Kind of holding their safety over their heads, saying, if you sign this, we'll help you out a little bit more, or is it a distraction from something else?
Yeah, you know my thoughts on two things, and they can be true at the same time.
Ugh.
I think in this case, all of like both of those things, I think they're both true, and they both muddy the waters in these negotiations. So is the focus purely on peace,
No,
or yeah, or is it on economic interests?
everything is transactional right now.
I know that's so. Listen, we talked about it leading up to the Trump administration, before the election.
He's a business.
He's a businessman. Some people want the government run like a business. Some would say that's not practical.
It's overstepping.
Right. So a lot of what he does is transactional. Once again, this is very much transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Now remember, the deal we're talking about was supposed to be signed back in February.
But they got in a fight in front of the press.
Yes, that all got derailed.
They were, never
Um,
mind.
and we briefly discussed what you're talking about with the deal being signed really quickly. We talked about that last week. I think both of us said we weren't really confident that we were going to see a deal happen. And now look, I'm even less confident we're going to see that deal signed soon.
Right. And just before Witkoff met with Putin, that Russian general was killed in a car bomb in Moscow.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the Kremlin blamed Ukraine. Wait, do you think it was one of those false flag kind of things?
No, I absolutely do not. I haven't
So you think Kyiv really did?
I haven't dove deep into it, but yeah, there are operatives, Ukrainian operatives within Russia who are
Okay.
trying to disrupt what Russia is doing.
Okay, well, obviously, this development does not help negotiations, and it's not going to swing things in Ukraine's favor.
No, look, it just escalates tensions, and then it fuels the Kremlin's narrative, which you put, right? You were like, well, this could have been a false flag, because it does. It does fuel the Kremlin narrative that Ukraine is the aggressor, and they're doing these things on Russian soil.
But that's because they came on Ukrainian soil first.
Right, yeah.
Well, I feel like everybody's forgetting that part.
Well, Russia, the Kremlin, is trying to make people forget that they are, to the point where Donald Trump is talking about how Ukraine started this war.
Right.
Zelensky, you shouldn't have started a war with somebody 10 times your size.
Let's rewrite everything. Let's
Right.
rewrite history.
Well, what's funny about that is in the same breath, he also said in talking about why Crimea can't go back to Ukraine is that he said, well, look, that was, if you wanted it, you should have fought the war in Crimea and taken Ukraine.
Except you took all of our weapons.
So you have a dichotomy of statements here from Donald Trump saying you shouldn't be aggressive and go after a country 10 times your size, but you should go after a country 10 times your size.
And it's your fault that you're in this situation.
Right.
You didn't fight back hard enough.
Exactly. So I think it's tough on all the negotiators, like U.S., Europe, Ukraine, Russia, because of the trust issue. And we're seeing a dichotomy of statements coming out from the administration, and it's not helping. And so no one really knows what's going to get two countries to agree to a peace deal. Now, right now, everything that's going on just adds fuel to the fire. It's an incredibly volatile mix, and you have intense fighting. You've got these attacks. You get some secret bilateral talks that's excluding Ukraine, wildly different public statements on progress, and then a reported peace plan that seems to demand huge concessions from the victim of this war, the victim of the aggression of Russia.
So, despite President Trump saying that they're very close, the reality on the ground and the stated positions, especially from Ukraine, suggest otherwise, is what you're saying.
And from an analytical perspective, the gap between the reported U.S. proposal and Ukraine's non-negotiables, that's territorial integrity, wanting a ceasefire first before agreeing to anything else, it looks, like you said, universe apart. Now, Trump might want a deal very badly, and Putin might find parts of the U.S. proposal that he agrees with, but unless Ukraine makes concessions, Ukraine says that they will not make. I don't think it's going to happen. Or, if there's an unprecedented pressure that forces them to make it, maybe we see something, but that would mean security guarantees are not in place for Ukraine. So this quote, very close, end quote from Trump seems more like wishful thinking, or maybe it's a negotiating tactic that he's using.
It's just, a lot to process with Ukraine, and that sense of deals being close, but maybe not really, echoes elsewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings us inevitably into the Gaza conflict. It feels like Groundhog Day sometimes, like the cycle of violence, the diplomatic efforts, but I've seen there are actually some significant movements, or at least reports of movements on the ceasefire front, alongside some really strong words flying around. Is this time different, or are we just seeing the same pattern?
I think Groundhog Day is putting it mildly here. We do that every week, right? We're still talking about the same thing every single week.
Every single week we start off with the same two
Will they, won't
conflicts.
they?
Will they, won't they?
Yep. But look, yeah, there's definitely some chatter going on right now. The key seems to be these ongoing talks. These are primarily involving a Hamas delegation, which is in Cairo right now, and they're talking with Egypt and Qatar, who's trying to mediate all of this. I think it was in a Saudi newspaper. So they laid out what sounded like a pretty comprehensive proposal expected from Hamas, and they're talking about a single phase release of all remaining hostages, but in exchange for certain Palestinian prisoners. They also want the IDF withdrawal to the lines held during the last ceasefire. They're asking for a halt to military operations and then restarting humanitarian aid entry into Gaza. There's some other things in there, but those are the most important. But they are also reportedly asking for a 5-year ceasefire with international guarantees.
Do you think Hamas has the leverage in order to be making these sorts of demands?
No, they absolutely don't, but they feel that the international community has that leverage and that the international community
Is on the Palestine side?
Yes, they're on the Palestinian side because of the suffering that's going on and the side that the United Nations has taken since the start of this war.
Well, 5 years is obviously pretty significant. And didn't that report also mention internal Palestinian elements like a technocratic committee for Gaza and potential reconciliation with Fatah?
Oh, yeah, it did. And look, that aligns with other whispers that I've been hearing. Hamas telling mediators that they're willing to halt all military activity. That includes weapon development and tunnel digging for that long-term truce.
Are they just saying that?
Absolutely. So this is how Hamas works. This is how Iranian proxies work because they know they have the backing of the regime in Iran.
And the international community, if they get their way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the technocratic committee idea also pops up in the Egyptian Qatari framework, and it seems like an area where there might be some overlap with Israel wanting that.
And for Hamas, the complete withdrawal is a massive sticking point, right? Because Israel's position seems completely to counter that. I mean, Israel has never hidden their stance. We know where they stand on that.
Absolutely. Israel's leadership has been consistent. They have not wavered on this. They want to continue the war until hostages are back and Hamas is destroyed or disarmed. And that's part of the reason.
So they changed it to disarmed now? Like they're not saying it has to be completely destroyed? Because when they started, it was the complete annihilation of Hamas. And now they're saying, okay, they just have to be disarmed.
So the way Israel would say it, now we would see it as Americans that, okay, those are opposing things. So
I don't think it's opposed, but.
Or you're loosening your structured or your direct ask of complete annihilation of Hamas. And Israel says a disarmed Hamas, because it's a militant group, is a destruction of Hamas. So if they're no longer armed.
But that really wasn't what they said in the beginning of the conflict.
It's all about it's like PR, right?
Yeah.
It's all about how you can frame it in the media and get people to back it. So we talk week in and week out about how Benjamin Netanyahu, he's got to destroy Hamas, right? That's part of his coalition.
His right-wing government.
Exactly. So to say disarmed, kind of loosen up,
Yeah.
and go, well, we'll just disarm Hamas, and people get up in arms, and you can go publicly and say, look, a disarmed Hamas is a destroyed Hamas, because
They
that's
need
all
their
they
weapons.
do.
Yeah, they're a militant group. Okay.
Um, but look, Israel has explicitly said that they are going to hold parts of Gaza indefinitely. That's another thing that they're starting to be firm on, and they're not wavering on. They've ruled out any arrangement leaving Hamas with influence or the ability to rearm.
Okay.
Kind of, squeeze, kind of like be a python or an anaconda. You're just going to squeeze them until they absolutely do have. They can't go anywhere else, and they are destroyed and annihilated. Now, Israel even floated Trump's old resettlement idea, Trump Gaza.
Rude.
Mm, That got shot down immediately by
Good.
the international community,
Right.
but Israel's bringing it back up. The U.S., meanwhile, are saying that they back Israel's core position, even while pushing for a temporary truce that right now Hamas keeps rejecting.
And speaking of international reactions, we saw some unusually strong language from Europe this week, like France, Germany, and the UK.
Yeah, like they called Israel's blockade on food and imports intolerable.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've said that on this podcast as well. That's direct language from some very close allies to Israel. They've explicitly condemned using aid as a political weapon.
Right.
And look, this rightfully so is the focus of the international community right now. Israel says that the blockade is a pressure tactic, but for these European powers to state so clearly that what Israel is doing right now violates international law, I think that's a notable pushback.
Feels like everyone is maneuvering right now, but the positions are miles apart. I feel like no one is on the same page right now. And internally among Palestinians, things aren't exactly harmonious either, right? Like Mahmoud Abbas made some waves this week. What is going on there?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if Abbas is helping the situation here. I don't know if he's trying to help the situation or just get back into the public eye. But this week he called on Hamas to release all the hostages. That sounds pretty pragmatic. He said to try to remove Israel's pretexts by doing this. So what he's trying to say here is release all the hostages, and then all the pressure is going to be on Israel to come to a deal.
I mean, not wrong, honestly.
Yeah, but Hamas goes, well, then what's our leverage at that point? I would say you leverage the international community to force Israel to move their front lines, to create a buffer zone that is that's secured by either UN forces or, I guess, some sort of forces. There's not going to be any forces who are mediators or moderate forces that choose neither side. But if you can get a group of peacekeeping troops that can help out, I think that would be great. And then in that same breath, Abbas demands that Hamas disarm. He calls them, the reported language here was he called them, quote, sons of dogs, end quote. That's a very Arab term to call these.
Son of a.
Yes. Let's go with sons of dogs.
Yeah. Much more poetic sounding.
Right, it is. But it's still extremely harsh.
It's still real rude, but
So as you can predict, Hamas fired back. They're not big fans of the Palestinian Authority. And they said he's unfit to lead. Here's how I see the situation. Abbas wants a seat at the table for post-war Gaza.
he should have one.
But he has zero leverage over Hamas right now. So all of this is just political theater.
Right.
You know how I feel about political theater. I absolutely dislike it. And that's because they're doing all of this while people continue to suffer.
Right.
I'm not just talking Palestinian
they're
people.
just saying things, but there's no action.
Yep. The people of Israel are suffering as well, you know?
Yeah.
People go, well, they're not being blown up or things like that. They're dealing with sirens day in and day out of missile attacks and having to go think of the psychological effects of having to go into a bunker.
Yeah, we can complain all day about how, Israel is the problem here.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining about that, but I know a lot of people here feel that way.
Mhm.
They just have a hardline stance, but we also don't have sirens going off
Right.
all the time. We don't have to hide underground. We don't have to drop what we're doing and try to find shelter somewhere. We don't have to wonder if our loved one is fighting Hamas in Gaza. Like, we're safe. So we
Yes.
have all the opinions, but we have nothing to really.
That's you make a wonderful point there. Absolutely. I think what you said is something that a lot of these protesters who
We
are
forget.
being violent towards, security people because they want to the Palestinian suffering out in the public, and absolutely do that, but also understand that other people are suffering as well,
Right.
and we should actually speak for both of those people, I think.
So we have Hamas potentially floating detailed terms, but publicly sticking to maximalist demands. Israel dug in on destroying Hamas, European allies raising alarms about the humanitarian cost, deep Palestinian divisions.
A lot, T.
So, where does this leave the actual possibility of a deal? I mean, especially with President Trump's visit to the region coming up in mid May.
Yeah, and he's gonna want a deal done by the time he jet sets off to the Middle East. Look, from my perspective, and I was taking an analytical approach to all of this, I think the gaps between Israel and Hamas are just far. They're way too. The gap is too huge right now. Well, I mean, the two sides are discussing either complete withdrawal or indefinite occupation. One side wants one thing, one side wants the other. That's too much. I think lasting. I think another thing is they want a lasting ceasefire. Israel wants to destroy Hamas. Right now, the humanitarian crisis is immense. International criticism, even from allies, is mounting on Israel. And yeah, the Trump visit adds another layer to all of this. So, is Trump's pressure going to be enough to bridge these fundamental divides? I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. I really do. The trust there is non existent. We know that. And this is especially true after that last ceasefire, which shattered just royally.
He should just tell them to stop on Truth Social like he did.
Oh, yeah.
Putin. That'll help.
Stop it.
That'll clear the way.
It always helps when we tell Eleanor to stop it. She seems to stop every time.
Not really.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's almost like her terms aren't being met, and therefore she will not be stopping it.
Her terms being, I need access to food at all times.
Yeah, basically. I like how Trump, is trying to forge all these deals and these conflicts. But it just seems to me like he doesn't actually care which side has to make the concessions. He just wants the deal done so he can be like, "Look what I did, guys."
Yeah. So that's absolutely what's going on here, and that's part of his Trumpism, right? I don't think so. He would say, "I am not an ally to anyone but the United States."
Right.
So that's the MAGA sort of thought, being an isolationist.
America first.
Right, America first, isolationist. And so Trump would say, I don't care. I want peace because it's affecting the United States. It's hurting our economy. And so let's stop this stuff. I don't care who wins and who loses.
Right.
Others would say, yeah, well, you're mostly on the side of Russia or you're mostly on the side of Israel at the cost of the other side.
But he's probably getting something out of it that we are unaware of.
Oh, yeah. And there will be a book written about it and we'll read and figure out, and then we'll see and say, oh, that's why he said it at that point. So he was working some sort of deal. Absolutely.
And while all of this diplomacy or attempted diplomacy happens, the fighting will continue and innocent people will be caught in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
The human cost just keeps on climbing. We'll have to keep watching closely. Let's keep our focus on the Middle East here and discuss U.S. troop reduction in Syria. But before we dive in, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Conservative investors. What does the name Reagan mean to you? Reagan was the ultimate conservative. We at the Reagan Gold Group consider ourselves the ultimate conservative gold company. Do you, as a conservative investor, see the storm clouds of chaos and uncertainty approaching? We do. The stock market hates uncertainty, and there is lots of chaos on the horizon. High inflation, unsustainable debt, and political tensions are rattling the markets and creating volatility. Does your portfolio have an anchor in this storm? You have car insurance, homeowners insurance, and life insurance. But what about your retirement savings, your 401k? We urge all fellow conservative investors to learn about the one asset that could help keep your nest egg from cracking under all this economic pressure: gold. Call the Reagan Gold Group right now to get your free wealth protection kit and ask us how to get up to $15,000 in bonus coins.
If you turned 65 recently like me, it's important you find a Medicare Advantage plan that gives you the coverage you're looking for. But finding one can be difficult. The best thing I did, and I suggest you do the same, is call a licensed insurance agent and let them walk you through your Medicare Advantage plan options. There are so many benefits you have access to, so make the call now and let the representatives explain everything to you. Our licensed insurance agents can offer you a variety of Medicare Advantage plans. Plus, the call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation to enroll. We're here to make it easy for you to select a Medicare Advantage plan that may work for your needs. Finding a Medicare Advantage plan can be easy if you do what I did. Make a quick call right now to learn more. Thank you. Call 877-476-1681. That's 877-476-1681. Call now.
Welcome back, listeners. As we alluded to before the break, the Pentagon confirmed that they are consolidating forces in Syria. So, Kervin, what's the actual bottom line here? Are we pulling out or just reducing? What are we looking at here?
Right. So the quote, the term from the Pentagon is consolidating, and that's the official term. Practically, it means a reduction in force. Now, they confirmed they're going to keep fewer than 1,000 troops there under what's called Operation Inherent Resolve.
Fewer than 1,000? Didn't we have more than that recently? Like, I remember reporting numbers went up not that long ago.
Yeah, you're right. This is as of late last year in 2024. I think the numbers were around 2,000. That was an increase from the roughly 900 that were there before the Hamas attack on Israel, October 7th of 2023, and all the subsequent attacks on U.S. forces by those Iranian proxies. So we beefed up the footprint in Syria. So this move means withdrawing roughly 1,000 troops over the next few months.
Okay, so we surged after October 7th, which makes sense. And now we're drawing down even below the pre-surge level. So what's the official reason the Pentagon is giving for this drawdown now?
Well, the official line, according to a Pentagon spokesman, is that the U.S. has made significant steps toward degrading ISIS operational capability. They're saying this consolidation reflects their success against ISIS.
Degrading ISIS.
Mhm.
I've heard that phrase before, haven't we? Like,
Yep.
we heard the caliphate was defeated back in 2019, and we all celebrated that.
We did.
We were all super pumped. But didn't the CENTCOM commander himself warn Congress just last year that an ISIS resurgence is still a threat?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's the rub in all of this. The caliphate as a piece of territory is gone, so ISIS doesn't control anything, thanks in large part to the Kurdish forces that the U.S. backed in fighting ISIS. But as an organization, as an insurgency, it's a little bit different. CENTCOM is still launching dozens of airstrikes. They know the threat there is not zero, and they're saying that they're going to continue strikes even against the remnants of the Islamic State.
So they're reducing the footprint, closing bases. I think I saw reports mentioning Green Village and Euphrates possibly closing, cutting down from 8 posts to 5, but still planning to hit ISIS from the air.
Yeah, and that seems to be the plan right now. So fewer boots on the ground, and they want to rely more on air power and then presumably the Kurdish partners that are still there.
Did you say presumably?
Presumably.
I may have, heard that incorrectly, but I heard presumedly, and I'm like, there's not
I
a
think you're right
D.
about that.
There's not a D. It's all right. Sometimes your tongue gets all thick in your mouth.
Yeah, I also probably need some water here, so
Yeah.
you keep going for it.
All right. Well, hold on a second. Let me think what I was going to say. I got distracted by your mispronunciation.
Worry.
All right. Okay. So isn't that exactly what's going to make people nervous? Like you've talked about this before, pulling troops out based on timelines or shifting priorities rather than the actual conditions on the ground. Some analysts are already drawing parallels to Iraq in 2011 or Afghanistan in 2021, worrying that this could be premature and risk that actual resurgence that was mentioned late last year. Risk that resurgence that the CENTCOM commander warned us about.
Yeah, and it's a valid concern, Tiana. You know how this goes. We saw what happened in Iraq. We saw what happened in Afghanistan. When you declare victory or sufficient progress, that's one thing. Ensuring that it sticks without a stabilizing presence, that's another thing. Now, ISIS attacks spiked last year. They've continued this year. Leaving too soon or, pulling out too much support because we still have partners there that are holding thousands of detainees from the Islamic State, that's going to create a vacuum. And these groups are experts at exploiting vacuums. I saw a former Army commander say recently, look, this is with removing forces from Europe, removing it from bases in the Middle East. And he would say, you can't project power. You can't deter adversaries from Texas. You need a force on the ground that's going to prevent escalation across borders.
So what's the counter argument? Is there a strategic benefit to doing this now other than just drawing down and saving the Pentagon some money?
Yeah, look, some would argue that a phased withdrawal, which that seems to be the plan here, a phased withdrawal of these troops allows for flexibility. So you can kind of adjust fire if things go south, maybe pause the withdrawal, or you could, let's say you're moving these troops back to Europe, you can send them back in if things happen and you need to get them back there. But politically, that's tough. Once you start bringing troops back to their families, telling them now you got to go back is very tough from a political standpoint. It could also be seen, all of this could be seen as a way to build confidence with the SDF. That's the Kurdish forces that are there. And this phased approach could show we're not abandoning them overnight.
Doing it slowly.
Slowly.
So you don't notice.
We're going to train you up so you don't notice. That's gaslighting, right? Isn't that from gaslighting?
Abandoning you?
No, we're not. What are you talking about?
We're not going to leave you.
Wait, where'd you all go? What are you talking? We were never here.
You did this all on your own.
It was all on your own. That's a way to give somebody confidence. You did this yourself. Yeah, I think they could be trying to pave the way for the SDF to kind of integrate more formally into whatever security structure emerges in Syria. That's another thing that is being left for another day. We got to figure out what the government structure is there. Now, the key phrase in all of this from the Pentagon is conditions-based. That's the term that they're using. So if this is not going to be conditions-based, if they're just saying that, if the conditions change and the Islamic State does start to recover significantly, is the United States, is the Trump administration prepared to reverse course? Adding 1,000 troops back into the Middle East, that's going to seem like a small price to pay. But how is the Trump administration going to frame it? They're going to frame it that way. Look, small price to pay because you could be dealing with a resurgent Islamic State.
It just feels like such a gamble with incredibly high stakes, not just for regional stability, but for our own security as well. Keeping terrorists worried about airstrikes versus letting them have the breathing room to plot future attacks.
Yeah, and look, word from the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, those other three-letter agencies that
We
don't like...
We love us some acronyms.
Yes. They say that fundamental Islamists are gearing up for a large-scale attack on Europe and the United States. I take that intelligence very seriously. So a forward defense posture, assessing the risks, managing resources, those are all very important aspects to this whole thing. And history tells us that when we misjudge the conditions on the ground or we leave too soon, we often end up paying a much higher price later.
Well, we will definitely be keeping a close eye on Syria in the coming months. I want to shift to major news coming out of India. Unfortunately, we have a deeply concerning situation unfolding between India and Pakistan that we need to discuss. It feels like we've talked about something brewing years ago. Like, it feels like we talked about it years ago, but this seems sharper? I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about India being one of the wild card players in geopolitics because of their friendliness to China, while also their cautious friendliness, I would say, because they still have some border problems there. Some of their discussions with Russia, being part of the BRICS community, but also being an ally to the United States and trusting the United States with certain things. And right now, the stakes are incredibly high. We're talking about two nuclear-armed neighbors with a long, bitter history. And this is particularly true over the disputed region of Kashmir.
So, walk us through what kicked this latest crisis off. I know that there was an attack, right?
Yeah, that's right. So earlier this week, Vice President J.D. Vance...
Well, there is the culprit.
Oh.
Just kidding.
No, yeah. He's had a tough week.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, anyone who has the internet in America, I don't know if these memes have traveled elsewhere, but it's kind of a running joke that wherever J.D. Vance goes, terrible things follow.
Yes. I mean, look, I've said the same thing about myself sometimes, right? Being stuck in coups and having, when I go to a certain location, something seems to pop up. And I'm like, well, if I'm deploying, don't follow me there. Just let me deal with it. So with what Tiana just said, right? J.D. Vance went to see the Pope. He passed away right after that. He went to India. These are just factual statements I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm really not trying to put it on the guy, but he did do this. No, he didn't do this. Let's not say that.
He did show up right before something major happened.
Yes. And so he did that in India. He was on a diplomatic mission. As he departed, there was just this horrific gun attack at a tourist spot in Pahalgam. Pahalgam.
I don't know.
Our Indian listeners, please talk to us about my
yeah.
pronunciation.
He could have looked that up, but
I could have.
Didn't.
I know. Things are going to change on this podcast. I'm going to have a lot more time to look things up. And that area is part of the Indian administered part of Kashmir, so it's hotly contested area. Now, 26 people were killed, and the reports say all but one of those were Indian civilians. It's being called the worst attack on civilians in that region in nearly 2 decades.
That is absolutely devastating. And as is typical in these situations, immediately fingers started being pointed.
Yeah, you're right. Immediately, like the moment after it happened. India pinned the blame squarely on Pakistan.
How would they know that, like, in the immediate aftermath?
Well, it's, how we talk about the initial emotional response to situations.
Right.
That's what you're
like,
going to...
I don't like Pakistan, so it must have been Pakistan that did it. Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
So India said that Pakistan backed the cross-border terrorism that's been going on. Specifically, Indian police named a Pakistani-based group, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and they even offered a significant bounty for any information on this group.
Okay, so India blames Pakistan. How did they escalate beyond accusations? Because reports I'm seeing mention some major diplomatic and economic moves in retaliation.
This moved fast and hard. I think India really, they took umbrage to this, right? They did not like it. They announced the immediate suspension of the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty. If you haven't read up on that treaty, I did. It was brokered by the World Bank, and it governs how the waters of the Indus River system are shared between the two countries. Now, both countries depend heavily on those rivers that flow from the Himalayas, so suspending this is a massive lever to pull from India.
So did India have like the majority of the control over this? Okay.
Yeah, because India's economy is far vast to Pakistan's. They have a lot of control.
So you're a little guy, we're a big guy, so we have control over it. Got it.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that treaty has survived actual wars between them before, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, and that's how you know that India is serious about this.
Do you know what their proof is that it was Pakistan, or are they still just going off feeling? Or has Pakistan come out and said, yeah, we did do this? Did they come out and say it?
No, I haven't seen any reporting of taking responsibility for what happened. And even then, if that group, that's a militant group that did it, Pakistan would say, we have no involvement in that militant group, so it's not our fault.
They're working on their own.
As with anything, India would say, we have intelligence that's classified that we can't share with everyone else, but we know based off of this intelligence, as someone part of the intelligence community, it is true that sometimes we have intelligence we can't share.
And that bothers me.
And that does bother you because I can't share it with you.
I like knowing.
I like the drama. Come on. Now, like I said, either India is taking this very seriously or they're trying to project seriousness onto this. So if you think, this is a false flag and India tried to do it themselves, it would...
I wasn't trying to imply that. I was just wondering what their proof was.
I'm absolutely not putting that on you, but some people think to that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
Tinfoil hat?
Yeah.
Put that on. I love to do that sometime. And go through, it helps the analytical process, right?
Being literally every single angle.
An analysis of competing hypotheses.
Right.
So how accurate could this be?
Right.
Now, beyond the water treaty, India has ordered Pakistani diplomats out of the country. They shut down a key border crossing between the two countries, and they gave Pakistani nationals 48 hours to leave India. Now, India's defense minister, he has promised a fitting response is going to be coming to Pakistan.
Like cross borders into Pakistan?
Correct.
Okay, so a fitting response, that sounds really ominous. So we haven't heard from Pakistan yet in this whole thing. So how has Pakistan reacted to all of this, especially the threat to their water supply?
Yeah, I mean, predictably, they responded with extreme alarm. Very strong language, and Islamabad declared that any Indian attempt to stop or divert the water that's allocated to Pakistan under that treaty would be considered an act of war. They stated they'd respond with full force across the complete spectrum of their national power. Let me reiterate, they are a nuclear power. So complete spectrum, that would involve nuclear weapons. So it's not subtle language here, especially between those two nuclear states.
An act of war over water, I mean, that takes it to a whole other level. So what else are they saying or doing?
Yeah, well, Pakistan announced it would reconsider all bilateral agreements with India. That would include the Simla Agreement that lays out diplomatic protocols between the two nations. And their defense minister fired back. He accused India of plotting terror attacks in Pakistan. He warned them essentially, quote, I'm going to quote him here, if our citizens aren't safe, yours won't be either, end quote. We've also seen reports this week of troops briefly exchanging fire across the line of control into Kashmir, and that would be breaking a 2021 ceasefire.
So we have the attack, the blame, the treaty suspension, diplomatic expulsions, border closures, threats of war over water, military posturing, and now shots fired. Okay, that's a lot.
Exhausting.
Yeah, an article I saw laid out several key reasons why this flare-up is so dangerous globally beyond the immediate India-Pakistan dynamic. So, for me and everyone else who is curious, can you break all of that down for us?
Yeah, this will be a while. So sit back, grab your coffee. Now, if we unpack what's really driving the tension here. It comes down to, I think, a few key points. First, there's a very real danger of a wider conventional war breaking out here. As we've been discussing, all the tough talk and military moves could easily get out of hand in this situation. That potentially leads to something even bigger than the clashes we saw in 2019. Behind all that, though, there is the nuclear shadow. That's the constant and, quite frankly, terrifying backdrop. So if a conventional war does start between these two nuclear-armed neighbors, the nightmare scenario is always that it could escalate. And that region is the very definition of a nuclear flashpoint. Then another point is we have to bring China into the picture. This isn't a simple two-sided issue for China. China is Pakistan's main backer. They even helped with their missile programs and has its own tense relationship and border disputes with India. Not to mention, China controls part of Kashmir. On the other side, India has strong defense ties with the U.S. You can see how easily a conflict could widen and draw in these bigger players. It's like a complicated three-way nuclear intersection. It's not good. And then we have this business with the Indus Waters Treaty potentially being suspended. That's very critical, and that's going to hurt the people of those two nations. Now, weaponizing water like that could wreck Pakistan's farming sector, make existing water shortages way worse than they already are, especially with climate change impacts, and it really sets a dangerous example. Now, when Pakistan labels that as an act of war, you understand how fundamental that resource is for them.
For everyone on the planet. Like, that's the first thing that humans need to find whenever they are lost somewhere. You have to find a water source.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And look, we talk about it with Iran. What's Iran's big deal? Well, they don't have water.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the resource that they really need. So if you're sanctioning them and not providing water, it hurts the people there. Now, lastly, I will say, I don't think we can forget the root context of all this, and it's land, it's Kashmir itself, the decades-old dispute, the ongoing insurgency against Indian control, and then the serious human rights concerns that groups like the UN have raised about the Indian crackdown there. It's a very, very volatile mix. I thought it was very important that we talk about that this week, and it puts the international community's response under a serious spotlight.
So bringing it back to your expertise and drawing on your decades of analysis and your time deployed in very complex regions, what is your gut feeling on this? Like, where do you think this goes?
So my gut feeling is, if this doesn't get resolved soon, and look, I do think that cooler heads will prevail as time passes, but if it doesn't get resolved soon, all this feels incredibly fragile. The speed of escalation, the rhetoric, particularly around the water treaty, it feels like guardrails are coming off. Domestic pressure or domestic political pressure in India, that seems immense on the Indian government, possibly demanding a response that goes beyond what we saw with the bombings in 2019. You have Pakistan's reaction, that act of war declaration, that leaves very little room for de-escalation. Then when you talk about water in that region, that's existential. As you put it, that affects everybody. Mistakes, miscalculations, they can happen very easily in these situations. And you and I, we both know the cost when diplomacy fails and the military option is taken. It's never clean, and the consequences here actually could be catastrophic.
Catastrophic definitely feels like the right word. 2 nuclear powers, disputed territory, water wars, geopolitical rivals. It is another powder keg. We'll obviously keep watching this closely, and I suspect this matters far beyond South Asia. Carvin, as always, thank you for your insights in breaking down all of these topics. Is there anything else you want to discuss? I think we need to mention that we're changing some things.
Yes.
We're
So
changing some things here.
Let's go through.
Let's break it down.
Let's break it down. You probably saw that these episodes have been releasing a little bit later, Saturday or Sunday. We don't like to just jump in and...
We also like to do things in phases.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at here. I was trying to think through what I'm saying here. we wanted to take a phased approach, and also talk to the Leon Media Network and make sure this is the right move to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we are doing within, the next month or 2 months is we'll be moving this show to Mondays.
That way we can get through the complete news cycle.
Exactly. You get Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. You're going to get all of the news from the week, to include the weekend, which things happen and we should be talking about. So,
Right.
for our New Zealand friends who are mowing the grass right now, who are listening to this and have said, "Oh, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I can't wait 5 days to listen to the episode while I'm mowing grass." We are sorry. You are at the front of our minds on this, but
Yes, we're sorry.
it just made sense to move this to Monday.
Right. So we're doing that, and there's some other things going on, but
Yeah, you'll understand
you just
when it
later.
happens.
Yeah, you'll understand later. But we're just letting you guys know you're not crazy seeing that the episodes are coming out a little bit later in the week.
Yes.
We have been slowly transitioning to Monday, and it's less stress recording on the weekend. I don't know what we were thinking, starting to record it
Well,
during the work week and everything, with everything the kids are doing things, and you've got work, and I've got stuff to do.
yeah, I think during the process as we started this podcast, I thought Friday's great, and then maybe I can do a daily 10-minute breakdown each day, and that never manifested because I didn't realize how much work a podcast is. So you're probably not going to see a daily podcast. But I thought, go through the week every day, and then on a Friday you have the complete synopsis of that week.
Yeah.
It makes more sense. I talked to Mike Leon about it, and they release theirs Monday morning as well, which I might try to release it 6 a.m. like they do. So that way you wake up 6 a.m. Eastern, 5, 8, whatever. You're going on your drive to work, and now you have something to listen to on a Monday morning. So That's where we're at now.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, that is it, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I just thought we should point it out because we haven't talked about it. We've just dropped the episode whenever we felt like it.
And I think people may have been thinking oh, they're just putting out episodes whenever. No, this was this was all part of the plan.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to This Week Explained. We hope you found it both informative and engaging. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. For more in-depth coverage of these stories and more, be sure to follow us on social media at This Week Explained.
Tiana, thank you so much. And until next week, stay safe out there.